Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Self-Discovery Radio Show. From mindfulness to makeovers, fitness to friendship, nutrition to naturopathic medicine, we cover all the topics that help empower you to live a more enriched and fulfilling life. Hosted by self-discovery guru and founder of Align Sign, Jessica Baker, each engaging episode includes a celebrated lifestyle expert who will inform and motivate you to look within and live a better life. We are thrilled you tuned in, and we're excited to share our dose of today's self-discovery wisdom.
Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Self-Discovery Show. If you've ever wondered what your handwriting says about you and the secrets it keeps about your personality, today you're in luck. So stop typing for a minute and grab a pen and paper. The basic premise that we're going to be talking about today is called graphology, which means that the central nervous system is responsible for the way your muscles move and react when writing. Handwriting analysts evaluate the form, consistency, quality, and pattern created by your sleight of hand, and then use that as a basis for psychological interpretation. Interesting, right? Joining me now is America's #1 handwriting expert and one of the world's top forensic handwriting experts, Bart Baggett. Hello, Bart. Welcome.
Hey, Jessica. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm glad you could make it.
I have been doing handwriting for so long, and it still fascinates me, just like it fascinates you in your introduction. It's amazing how this works. I can't explain it, but it works every time. And if your listeners get a pen and paper, they'll also be fascinated.
Yes. So if they get a pen and paper and they write something down so they can participate along with us, what should they write down? Is there a particular sentence that you have in mind? Or?
Yeah, there's a silly sentence that I've used for many, many decades, and it says, "Dear Bart, you and your silly monkey don't go home to the zoo," and then the autograph. So very simple, you and your silly monkey don't go home to the zoo. Grammatically, it's incorrect, but it has a lot of Y's and T's and G's and O's and things that make it very, very easy to follow along during a radio interview.
Okay, so say that one more time slowly so you can jot something down. You
and your silly monkey do not go home from the zoo.
And then my signature. Great.
Yes, your signature. Okay. And the reason we do that is handwriting as a science has about 150 different symbols, and that's way too complex for even an introductory course. So I like to talk about 5 or 6 simple things that you can look in your writing, things that reveal self-esteem, sex drive, honesty, sensitive criticism, maybe some fears, really simple primary traits when you can look at it right in your writing, even during a radio interview, and go, oh, my God, this really works. And that's why we use that silly sentence, and that's why we keep it basic.
So it's true that dotting all those I's and crossing those T's is actually very important.
You know, what's interesting in our language, there's a lot of metaphoric language we use, like feeling down, for example. You know, the language, which obviously means feeling sad, but in handwriting, it actually physically manifests as feeling down. Like the handwriting all goes down to the right, or feeling up, which all is optimistic. So it's interesting, our language sometimes has an interpretation that is exactly the same thing in graphology. And dotting your I's, by the way, close to the stem, it means specifically a good eye for detail. So it really is metaphorically exactly what it means in the writing. So it's not far off. A lot of you probably can do this with some intuition, but there is an exact science behind it. And I think that's why corporations and you know, people pay me to come around the world and speak, because the science behind it takes out all the intuition, and then you're right on the money.
Interesting. So give us some good examples. If we've written down our sentence about the zoo, can you kindly shed some light on how this works and how we might interpret our sentence that we just created so that it can just, you know, help give us more insight to our own personalities and perhaps others?
Yeah, one of the basic fundamental elements of being human is how sensitive you are to criticism. And one of the easiest ways to spot that is in the lowercase d. So, for example, the reason I had the word don't go home to the zoo, D-O-N-T, is people either have a loop in their stem, or they have no loop in the stem, or they have a really big balloon loop in the stem. And you have, Jessica, a mild loop in your stem, which means you're kind of like moderate. And so what that trait means, for those listening at home, is how do you react to criticism? How sensitive are you to me looking at you and say, Jessica, I don't like your hair today, or those are ugly shoes, or I love your makeup, I love your lipstick color. Like that compliment or criticism, the level of reaction and the level of pain you feel is directly correlated to the size of that loop. So you actually handle criticism pretty well. You don't love it, so you're right, you're moderate as far as how sensitive you are. Interesting thing about that trait is that is not always a bad trait. In fact, in most of my books, one would read it and go, oh, Bart doesn't think you should have that because that's a fear. But, one of the best speakers in the world, Tony Robbins, has a huge loop in his D, and he is one of the best speakers. He's obviously motivated by validation. He's fantastic at what he does. He's done great things with NLP and other sciences. But I wouldn't go to him, and also Michael Jordan, one of the best basketball players in the world, right, arguably. Both of those people have huge loops in their D, which means they have a huge fear of criticism, but that also might have been one of their biggest motivations to be great at what they did. So, you can't always say a fear is a bad thing because it might be motivating you to be better than you are. Because I changed my D when I was a kid. When I was 14, I had a real big loop in my D, and I thought, I'm tired of feeling like people don't like me. Like it hurt. It hurt all the time. Criticism. I was a sad little kid. And when Dr. Walker, he goes, Bart, if you would just change your D, you wouldn't care so much what people thought about you. And I thought, well, this can't be this easy. And I said, but I'm tired of feeling like, are they talking about me? Do they like me? What does she like? So I changed my D. And so I literally have a retraced D for the last 25 years. And generally, it's not that the pain completely went away, but I care so much less about what people think. Jessica, if you looked at me and said, Bart, I don't like your shirt, I don't like your boots you're wearing, I'm going to say, I'm so glad you're not wearing them then. Let's go have a soda. Like, it just doesn't bother me. And I think that really helped me. At the same time, maybe that pain would have motivated me to do something different. So it's not always good or bad, but the D is key.
Yeah, you have to decide whether or not it's constructive criticism or if it's just people being mean. So it sounds like you've been able to decipher the two since then. And
well, I just changed it so I don't care. And the bad side of that is I may have been obnoxious. I may have been inappropriate at times, but I don't care anymore, so I have fun. I went out and wrote books, and I've been in movies, and I did all the things which I usually people said you couldn't do because I didn't care if I failed. That's another thing you can look in your handwriting if you have fear of failure, and then the self-esteem. And so let's move on to the self-esteem, which I think is the most important part. If you take anything away, the loop in the D is probably easy to spot. And then self-esteem. So how do you perceive the world, and how are your goals? I'm looking at your handwriting, Jessica, and your T's, like in the word personality or the word you and your silly monkey go to the zoo, T-O-Z-O-O. So the T's reveal your goals and your ambition. And so I would say more than half of your T's, Jessica, are in the upper part of the stem, which means you have a pretty good self-esteem. It means you have high goals. You're very ambitious. And then the other half are kind of moderate. So you're also kind of in the middle zone between pragmatic and ambitious. But you're definitely not arrogant, and you don't have like this arrogant, swashbuckling personality that's going to annoy people. But your self-esteem could still use improvement, but it's all pretty good. When I started, my self-esteem was not good. My T-bars were all in the middle zone. They were kind of low. And when I changed that, in fact, I had an ex-girlfriend who used to tell me I have a manufactured high self-esteem. I didn't know if that was a compliment or not.
What does that mean?
But at least it means that I changed my writing. So I have a belief system that I can do anything I want. I have a belief system that I'm incredibly good looking like Brad Pitt and the young Robert Redford. My reality may be different.
That's hilarious. But you know what? You've got to start somewhere. And if you can't give yourself compliments, then you shouldn't expect anybody else to. So it's good.
Well, what happened is I became incredibly ambitious. I published my first book at 23. I went to Pepperdine, and I decided that I could do anything I wanted. And so, even if I think the belief systems come first. So whether I had the skill set or the looks or the talent, I had the ambition and the belief system. And as you know from all your personal development, Jessica, if you can get someone to change their belief system about what's possible, normally the world and universe opens up and hands you part of that. And so I think I've had a really colorful, blessed life, given, I grew up in a small town in Dallas, Texas, which is not exactly the New Age mecca for forward thinking, handwriting analysis and NLP and meditation. Not exactly what you'd see in every corner in Dallas, in Texas. I'd had better chance, being a football star, but I wasn't big enough. So.
Well, you had a different destiny. So on that topic, what I would love to hear your professional journey and what events have, kind of led you down this unique career path to becoming an expert in handwriting analysis. It's not exactly something that you say as a kid, when I grow up, I want to be, America's #1 handwriting analyst. So.
No, it's not. And I think I was privileged. And sometimes I wonder where my destiny would have been if I hadn't met one person, because sometimes one person can change your life. And I know that because I'm that person for hundreds of thousands of people around the world, because I've got campuses in India and China now, and I meet them. And it's very weird being on the other side of that guru mess, because I was just a kid when I learned, and my mentor named Ray Walker taught classes. My dad was kind enough to pay for my handwriting classes, and basically it was Graphotherapy, which was changing your writing. He taught hypnosis, and he also did forensic analysis. And so when I was 14, I was learning this, and I honestly thought it was just, I turned to my dad and I said, Dad, this is silly. You can't tell anything from handwriting. This is ridiculous. And then he listed all my negative traits. I was sarcastic and I was stubborn.
Oh, boy.
I said, okay, well, maybe you know that because you're my dad. He goes, why don't you come to class with me? So very young, I was analyzing my students in high school, all the girls that, I dated or failed to date, which was usually failed to date. And it became a source of social proof for me. And I was the most entertaining person in the room. People loved the fact that I had this unique skill. And it just, everywhere I went, I go to the waiter or the waitress, it was just something that was so fun and engaging. So for me, I think socially, it opened me up to be engaging and interesting for people, but I was interested in them. Like, I could sit down with you, Jessica, and if we weren't on a radio show, just have a conversation about who you are, and it would make you feel like I've known you for years. So for me, it was a social lubricant, and so I didn't have any anticipation at 14 and 15 of making a career out of this. But what I did see was Ray Walker had built a career. He was on radio shows all the time. He was on TV. He was in the news because he did forgery analysis. And I thought, well, that's a very interesting career. He's helping people, and everyone found it fascinating. So when I was Anna Pepperdine, I wrote a book called Handwriting Analysis for Love, Sex, Relationship. So I guess it's been almost 2 decades since I wrote that book. And that led me on this journey of radio host, radio guest. I've been on Howard Stern. I've been on Larry King Live. I've done forensics. I've traveled around the world. So that one book led me into this world of being a teacher and hopefully enlightening people along the path.
Wow. Yeah. Great. Yeah. No, it's extremely fascinating, and I can't help thinking, and I'm sure some of our listeners are thinking as well, how can we apply this in our daily lives? Like, do you have any great tips that we can say, okay, for example, we're out socializing and we just get to know somebody and we want to use some of these quick tips that you might have to share just to kind of break the ice and, get to know somebody on a deeper level.
Yeah, it's funny. I sell books, of course, to all ages, and I think generally women are more open-minded to new age stuff. So a lot of customers are women, and a lot of my customers are women that have been through a divorce, and they say, I'm never going to do that again. Like, I'm going to find a way to eliminate that type of guy. But that's not always the customer. There's a huge, I don't know if you know, there's a huge subculture of men that read books and courses just to meet women. Like, they just don't have the social skills to meet women or anything. And so one of the little niches that my products have served is men have been using a little deck of flashcards called the Grapho deck and the basic fundamental traits, and they just use it to break the ice. And so they'll take these cards, and women do it too, and they'll just say, hey, let me analyze your handwriting. And they have like 5 or 10 hit traits memorized. And if you do it well, you're still correct. You just don't have the depth. And so it just breaks the ice. It starts the conversation about your self-image. It starts the conversation about how honest you are. It starts the conversation, and then you actually talk about what's important, which is each other, opposed to what game is on and what the weather's like and where'd you go to college and things that kind of you run out of gas pretty quickly, especially if you're single. Like that's a really great tool if you're single.
No, for sure. I would love to know how to tell if somebody is more honest versus less honest, and some of those other qualities that you're just now mentioning. It sounds intriguing.
Well, I can answer that in one simple trait. So I'm glad you answered that. There is one trait which reveals pathological liar. And so I'm not saying that if he doesn't have this trait, he's honest. So it doesn't work the other way. Just because it's not in the handwriting, you can't assume that it doesn't exist. But if it is there, you're going to know it's a huge red flag. So I have like 10 hell traits in one of my books, and this is one of them. And Jessica, I'm looking at your handwriting, and the good news is you're not a pathological liar. This is awesome.
Yes.
The other good news is you're basically transparent, maybe a little too talkative, but you're very, very honest. And I'll tell you where I got that, and everybody can follow along as well, is anywhere in the lowercase o, like Y-O-U, you and your silly monkey, go, G-O, the O reveals your ability to communicate and how clear and honest you are. And so essentially, Jessica, your O is clean and open, and occasionally it looks like a U. So it's open like a mouth. So you talk a lot, which is perfect because you're a radio host because you love to talk and you're honest and you're easy to talk to. It's great. So what you're looking for that's negative is the convoluted O, the O with 2 or 3 loops in the middle of an O. And I bet you can't even draw it because it's too complicated. It's outside your nature to lie. But some people have a loop in the right side. That means they're secretive. Some people have a loop on the incoming loop, which means they have self-deceit. So you have people that are having an affair, or they have a weight problem, or they're smoking, and things that they'd like to change, but they're not admitting it. That's what self-deceit is. And when those loops cross in the middle, you have a convoluted O. And so anyone with convoluted O's, I generally don't trust off the bat. I think it's a huge red flag.
Well, that's good information. And what are some other things that we should be aware of, like, you know, say if I'm looking for a love interest, or, you know, some of our listeners out there are like meeting new friends and what have you. What are some other great tips aside from honesty that you think would be useful?
Well, you know, I read a lot of Malcolm Gladwell. He's one of my favorite authors, and he had this wonderful book called Blink. And inside that book, he talked about relationships and long-term compatibility. And one of the correlations that I've noticed in both handwriting analysis as well as other modalities is if one partner is toxic, the relationship is toxic. So it's, you know, even if you have you're clean, and if you pour dirty water in clean water, the whole puddle gets ugly. And so for you, Jessica, like, you don't have resentment, you don't have anger at men, you don't have paranoia. Like, you've got a lot of good things going for you. So if you end up dating somebody with resentment or anger, you know, it's going to muddy the whole thing. And so you're not going to be able to be the Jessica that you should be if you accidentally meet somebody. And things like anger and resentment and revenge, those are not simple things to see or understand on a first, second, or third date. But all those traits are very clear in different handwriting samples. For example, resentment, which is what's very common in I think it's the only thing that's common among all serial killers. So Ted Bundy's the most famous example. If you've ever Googled Ted Bundy handwriting sample, you'll probably end up at Handwriting University, but you'll see that he has a straight, rigid beginning stroke in almost every sentence. And so his level of hatred went back to childhood. So if you see that in somebody's writing, you know they've got unresolved resentment, you know, and that's just going to muddy the water. So even if it's not directly
What do you mean, like
now,
a straight line? What do you mean, like a straight line?
Like if you took a ruler and leaned it against the wall, that ruler would begin the O. For example, if you can imagine a little ruler starting every sentence, it looks like a straight, hard line, and that's not common. You can't picture it because you don't have it. Like you're writing all sorts normal, and you have like a round, feminine writing with wide spacing. All of that speaks to your feminine nature, your generosity, your ability to work well on teams. You handle stress pretty well. Like some people, Jessica's handwriting, I think you may think your handwriting is messy because it's not perfect. I happen to adore that about you because people with perfect handwriting tend to also have perfectionist tendencies, which means they have anxiety, which means they put their perfectionist rules on me, and that means I have to do the dishes every time I do them. That means I have to make the bed every time. That means I can never put clothes on the floor. That means I have to squeeze the toothpaste in a certain place, or they get upset. So I'm not a big fan of perfect, pretty handwriting. I prefer someone like you that's bouncy baseline that's not so uptight.
Thank you. So resentment, and what was the other one?
This is a great
How
one.
can you tell perfectionist? A perfectionist is just someone who has tidy handwriting?
Yeah, I would say tidy is a great word. If you could take a ruler and it would be like a perfect baseline, and it's just absolutely pretty in every area, it's symmetrical. You look at it and go, wow, that's really symmetrical and beautiful. That person probably has good rhythm and then also perfectionism. So it's basically the baseline. The trait about
the handwriting? Go ahead. Sorry.
The trait about the hanger at women and men is fascinating. It's a little hard to describe on the radio. It's called a stinger. And if you actually Google the word stinger or Bart Baggett stinger and handwriting, you'll find it. Because I think our school, Handwriting University, is the only people that teach this properly of all the books. And the reason graphology isn't as well known is because most of the graphology teachers have 4 or 5 things that are just incorrect in their books, and so then it doesn't get the respect. So if you're 80% correct all the time, you're never going to get the level of respect. So what we did is we took out all the stuff that doesn't work. And this one trait's really fascinating because if you see this in a guy's writing, it means he resents women. If you see it in a women's writing, it means she resents strong, challenging men. And so it's almost like a bee stinger. It looks like the wave, a crest of a wave. So I went to Pepperdine. The mascot is wave. So imagine you have the crest of a wave. That's what a D or a C would look like. And I'm sorry, I'm not illustrating it perfectly on the radio, but when you see this, and if you understand what it is, it's something that you absolutely would not want to be in a relationship with, especially you, Jessica, because you don't have it.
Thank you.
If you had it, then it would be okay to date someone with it because you both would have resentment and you could work it out. But if you don't have it, that just means he's going to push your buttons. You look for challenges. He's going to get bored. He's going to move on. And it's interesting.
I'll have a hard time understanding where he's coming from, perhaps.
Well, he's going to just cause trouble because he wants a fight. If somebody just wants a fight because they like challenges, well, you're going to be fighting all the time. And so it's just one of these really toxic traits. It's basically anger and resentment at a parent or a guardian when they're children, but they bring all that stuff into a relationship. And I think that's the key thing to understand why it's so valuable, because most people bring their baggage into a relationship, and normally it's unconscious, and then they push it all on their partner as if you're supposed to know and somehow heal them. And so for me, that's one of those traits I just don't go out with.
What about a person's handwriting? I know a lot of some people have very small, tiny handwriting, or it's hard to read. It's almost like their own code, and anybody else that tries to read it, it's very difficult. What does that say to you?
Well, I normally would say that I'd have to see the writing to be specific, but there is some general truths to that. First of all, small handwriting normally means socially introverted or focused. I just did a class on how to hire people through handwriting, and one of the things that I noticed was in my business is everyone who's our internet programmers and anyone who does programming, language, even some of our graphic artists, if they're introverted, they have small handwriting. And the more angular handwriting they are, the better they are at solving problems. So I think Apple or IBM would be full of engineer-type people with small handwriting. Likewise, big handwriting, big fluffy writing, that would be much better in customer service, in receptionist, all that kind of stuff. It's very rare to get someone that can be great at focused attention and also great on the telephone. So sometimes tech support is one of those tricky things where you have to have technical knowledge, but also be really kind. So the fact that you can't see it or interpret it, I don't really have a good answer for you. I had a friend in high school that actually made his alphabet like Dracula. And so all his handwriting looked like the type font of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And he dressed like Dracula, and he had makeup, and it was really odd. And so he took his handwriting as a reflection of this character that he was portraying. And I thought that was really odd. So, in that case, that's just a weird anomaly where I wouldn't have an answer for you as much as saying this person's, creating some symbolism with consciousness opposed to being unconscious about the symbolism.
I see. Okay. That's good. That's good information. Introverts versus extroverts. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's not as easy as small handwriting and big handwriting. The slant matters. I mean, truthfully, like on our website, Handwriting University, like our basic course is free. So I mean, the basic, like you can get like 10, 20, 30 of these the individual traits, and you can get a working knowledge for it. So you don't have to invest tons of money to learn the fundamentals. But I think introvert experts really important in hiring, and it's also important in relationships. One of my other mentors, Phyllis Mattingly, she didn't learn it until she was 50, and she went into, it's a great story, by the way. She went into a guy that was teaching handwriting back in 1961, I think, and she said, here's my husband's handwriting, here's my handwriting, why is this not working? And he wrote backwards, so he wrote like backwards to the left, and he wrote small. She wrote to the right, so she was an extrovert, she loved to be on stage, she was gregarious, she was talkative, and he was, by every definition, introvert. And the guy looked at the writing and said, Phyllis, there's no way you're going to change him. He's an introvert. He described it, and she looked at it, and she's like, it's not my fault. She says, no, it's not your fault. It's your choice that you married the guy, but you're never going to feel love. You're never going to feel connected. You're never going to have the warmth that you desire because he doesn't have the capability of it. And so at that point, she ended up getting a divorce. She got excited about handwriting. But what's interesting about that story is he was such a perfectionist introvert. He went down to the basement and invented what we now call the water pick because she was spending too much time flossing her teeth. So this introvert was so smart, and they sold that company for $2 or $3 million to JCPenney, and it's still a brand. I mean, the water pick is still a brand, and she became one of the most famous handwriting experts in the world. Now, she's passed away now, but all because, like, she just married the wrong guy. And once she got clear that she couldn't change him, she let him go, and she moved on with her life.
Right. Well, at least something positive came out of it, and for them both to understand that, you know, it's like asking a fish to fly. There's nothing wrong with either of them. They just have, you know, they are who they are. So that's a great metaphor because it's true. And if you're single now, it's great because you can use it as a tool to not get in a bad relationship. If you're in a relationship, now you're challenged a little bit more. You have to figure out what the fears are, you know, what the love language is. A lot of books about doing that. But you got to work with somebody's fears and with their personality type, and you have to work within that. Because I'm not suggesting just because they're introverted you should leave, but you're going to need to get your social validation outside of the relationship, but not in a sexual way. So if you're an extrovert, you need to make sure that he understands that you've got to have girlfriend time. You've got to go out with your friends. Maybe you want to go watch the game. And it's okay that he doesn't come with you, and you don't resent him because he wants to sit home and play video games. And these are just, you got to understand that's where they're at. I love your metaphor. You can't teach a fish to fly.
So if any of our listeners wish to learn more about your handwriting analysis services and what they might be able to contact you about, I would appreciate if you share that with us since we have just a couple more minutes left, and then any tidbits that you think you can throw in there before we close out.
Yeah, I do. I would recommend just stop by the website, handwritinguniversity.com. And, of course, we have students all over the world, even local teachers. But there's a lot of free stuff on the website. There's a Level 100 course, which is totally free, and it's handwritinguniversity.com. One of the final things I'll leave you with is that if you can transform your life by thinking, by meditating, by awareness, by all the things that you talk about in your radio show, one of the easiest ways to do it is if there's something in your writing that you're not happy with. Let's say you have a low self-esteem or your sense of criticism or you have a fear of rejection. You can change those traits. And just like John Assaroff teaches in his stuff, the mind and the medicine and the meditation, if you change your physiology, if you change your thought processes, your outcomes will change. Tony Robbins teaches the same thing. The difference is we say you can change your T-bar, cross it high on the stem, and your self-image will eventually change. And so I encourage everyone to make their signature as bold as possible, cross their T-bars high, and you'll begin to feel your thinking processes change. And your thinking processes change, your outcomes will change. And maybe you too can travel the world like I did, write a number of books, star in movies. I mean, crazy things I never thought was possible. I have to attribute to the fact that I changed my T-bar when I was 14.
Wow. Yeah, no, I definitely think life's an adventure, and until you seize the moment and feel really alive, you're not truly living. So definitely I'm on par with your thought process, and I can't wait to explore more.
I challenge you to raise your T-bar and make it a little longer, Jessica, because you're already charming, you're already ambitious. You're just going to get more powerful, more ambitious, you'll have higher goals, and you'll think, oh, my God, I changed my T-bar just a little bit, and now I have a national radio show. I have a TV show. Oh, my God, I've written 5 books. I got to go thank Bart. Where's Bart? I got to thank him because this is all a responsibility.
Yes, and with that, I will say thank you as we close out, and I'll be chatting soon. Thanks again. Bye,
okay,
Bart.
Jessica. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.